I'm just recording this after I've started editing because I've noticed that the quality visually of this latest video doesn't seem to be brilliant. I hope this isn't actually me just having not noticed that up until this point. There wasn't all of them, for whatever reason this one just randomly is worse, but yeah, I've kind of recorded it now. There's not much I can do at this time. Because of what will be covered in Saturday's video, bonus video, that shouldn't be a problem again afterwards. But yeah, with this one, annoyingly, unless it fixes itself in the export, whatever's happened with these files, yes, I accept what it looks like at the moment. And either way, it's more a thing where you're going to be listening, aren't you? It's not really something you see. Or you're not really watching me, I assume, unless you really want to look at my face. I don't know. But anyway, I'll just wanted to acknowledge that out the gate, that yes, this one does look a bit weird. And without further ado, I'll leave my past self to now actually do that video. Right, let's get down to business. I here, as an author, am trying to make a career in writing and selling books, no matter how much of an uphill battle that is, and as such, obviously, I'm going to have more entries into my series down the line than the ones that are currently being released in this 2016 series. That's when it's set, obviously, when it's being released. I've discussed some of those other future books already in previous videos, but I figured I might as well talk about the actual next work in progress. What is actually going to come after this first set of 4 based around Philip Quint and the Brethren Lords and so forth. Well, hello and welcome to the Ragnarök Chronicles. My name is Dominic and this is a channel where I just talk to you about some of the stuff from the books that I'm writing, kind of as I was just saying. So this next book that is going to come after this set of 4, it's a standalone book, first of all, as the next few are going to be. And it's going to be set in the past, in 300 and something AD, I forget the exact date. I think it might be in the 390s. Not that that's wholly important. That date is purely based upon some calculations wherein how long would it take information to cross a given span of space, because this book is set nearer to the Camelopardis. I think I've said that right, galaxy, rather than being in the Milky Way. So basically just some other thing that happens elsewhere at a given date, information is received there. Well, if we now have to extrapolate backwards, at what date would this have taken place? That will be when the data was being sent. So anyway, as you gather there, yes, this is a story taking place upon an alien world, which was one of the 3 inspirations that I had for what was the starting point of this book. This story is one of those that came about much later in the planning process compared to the majority of the books, which are more that I've been planning for most of my life. Similar to how the fairy tale-esque story in the video, a science fiction, a fairy tale, whatever I called it, a fairy tale and science fiction, one of the previous videos, check that out as well, like how that was a much more recent idea. This one I started coming up with in the summer of 2018. So yeah, so one of which was that it was going to be on an alien planet of some kind. This was inspired by seeing these largely spherical crystals, which then had some kind of crack around the side, which could show more of the actual gemstone interior. This led to the idea of, well, what if you had a planet which actually had this massive crack chunk taken out of the crust and some of the mantle, as well as obviously then having to think about how on Earth, or how on Balte, as the planet is called, how on Balte can that actually happen and the planet still exists and everyone survive upon it. Secondly was that I wanted to do a story based around a society that was almost entirely academics, because that just wasn't something that I hadn't necessarily done before in any of the other stories, in any of the races that I had. Obviously have academics in other races, but not to the extent where they're all with certain people. Now, I'm usually against the idea of, like in science fiction, where you have a race and they're all exactly the same, unless it's something like the Borg in Star Trek. Obviously, the whole point is that they've been assimilated into this collective. But you just say that, oh, this planet is all one environment, or this race is all the exact same type. Just look at humans, we are so very different. But even still, within that, within a people that have dedicated their entire culture towards the pursuit of knowledge, you still have the different academic fields within that, and then that's still, you can still have different personalities and what they care about, how they go about these approaches and so forth. What I also just want to make clear is that I am in no way saying whether this is a better or worse society than what we have here. I don't want it to come across like I am saying, oh, whatever it is, like, you know, clever people should be in charge, or the only thing that matters is knowledge and everything else is unimportant, whatever. No, this is just an experiment in exploring what that kind of society would be like. It may have its advantages, but it also definitely has its disadvantages that would also be explored within the story as well. So that's the second thing. And then thirdly, because this was around a time I was trying to think of just what other actual mediums of storytelling or kind of narratives, quote unquote, can you have that I haven't necessarily done already. There was a few that I came up with, one of which was musicals, and considering that it's a book and also that I'm terrible at writing songs and like poetry and stuff, that's probably not going to happen. Next was kind of, could you try to work a narrative into kind of like a cookery book style thing, so it's presented as recipes, but there's actually other things going on if you interpret the stuff. Again, not something I think I still have, like, I want to have a go at something like that at some point, but not for this. The one that I did land on was the idea of a documentary. So I wanted to tell a story largely of the production process of a documentary, but also have them within it snippets of what the actual content of it is as well. Okay, so we have on this strange planet out in the Camelopardalis galaxy people who are all just about the pursuit of knowledge, and this story will focus on characters who are making documentaries. I'm not going to go into the entire structure of their society in this video and why it's specifically important that these three protagonists are making these documentaries. That's not the sort of thing I'm really looking to get out of this video. I more just want to talk about the process of me putting the book together as it is right now. And the issue is that because that is my focus, that it is meant to be about them doing this research and making a product, it's not the same kind of story as, like, for the Philip Quint books, the first four, which is good, because again, as I've repeatedly said in different places, I want to make sure that I have a go at telling a diverse array of stories as possible. Problem is that because it's not the kind of narrative structure that I'm used to, it involves a lot more experimenting on how to make it exciting. Not that every single story has to be high octane, exciting and so forth, but again, just making sure that it works as it is. There is other kind of exciting stuff going on as well, kind of in the world of the, or again in around Balte itself, in terms of kind of subterfuge and secret societies and other kind of clashes between different sections, kind of like how you would have the different houses in Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, turning against each other or trying to create alliances and whatever. Again, of course, this all in a scholarly framework. You've got that going on as well. You've got some other stuff outside of the planet as well, some spacefaring things where you can have, again, a bit more creativity and the things we can get away with, the peculiarity and the bizarreness of space. And within those, you have these three protagonists, each doing their own thing, kind of these intertwining threads, each with their own arcs and things that they achieve. But again, I mean, at this point where in the process of writing it, I'm feeling like, because this isn't immediately into the action, this isn't about, you know, the fighting of an enemy or that sort of thing. It's more of a gradual exploration and study of these people. I'm just obviously thinking about, again, is this coming out the way that I want it to come out? So, to try to make myself feel more comfortable about this, I have kind of added in more antagonistic elements into the world. But again, I'm now trying to find a balance with that of not detracting from what is the core of the story, or not to make it feel like I'm putting these odd side bits in just to facilitate the action. I'm including some ancient being that has been stalking certain people under certain conditions. Like, does that feel off compared to the style of everything else that's going on? I, right now, just in my life in general, have a number of other things that I'm working on. For a fair bit, I was kind of detained from writing this because I was obsessed with the Mario stuff that I was talking about in last week's video. And otherwise, even before that, because again, I've been working on this technically since summer of 2018, other things just get in the way, like going back over the first 4 books to make sure they're re-edited, which I've done a couple of times in that interim to get them to the point where they're now being published. Or I was doing so much work from a tutoring job while that was going on that I just didn't have time to write, really, was to dedicate it to that. And otherwise, I don't know, it's just... Maybe it's because it's been a while since I've properly written like brand new prose rather than just editing stuff that I've already written. I'm in a little bit of a rut at the moment where I can get stuff down, but it's all over the place. I'm jumping back and forth between sections of chapters here, there, and everywhere. It's not coming together in any kind of linear way. I don't know. I think I just need to get back into like mindset, that sort of thing. What I've actually found though is, again, just to refer back to what I was doing with the Mario game ideas, because what I was doing with those kind of with that document, which again is still available on my website if you want to check it out, link below, was that because I was just doing overall descriptions of each of the game ideas and putting them next to each other, having them written down like that also helped me to maintain a better idea and perspective of the overall branching timeline that I was creating between these games. So what I'm actually thinking is that now that that's done, because I already have chapter breakdowns or to an extent of this new book that I'm doing. Anyway, because I always have to. I always need to have some kind of skeleton framework at the very least while I'm writing. This book was the first time I did try to instead do the technique where you just see where the story goes as you let it flow. No, that doesn't work for me. I need to know each of the main plot points that we're working towards. But more than just having that, basically, this is the chapter, this is what this character needs to achieve, this is what this character needs to achieve, this is what this character needs to achieve. If I actually do what I did with those Mario games and actually do like full descriptive breakdowns of what happens in each chapter, hopefully that might actually get me in that better headspace of appreciating everything that needs to happen in a more detailed way that I can see all at once, and hopefully that will get me back into the flow of writing properly again. I should have the time to be doing that now, now that I'm not working all the other stuff. Another part of just my issue I think I'm having at the moment is, weirdly for me, I'm struggling to come up with a title for this. Usually in the past, I've been fine with just devising what I'm going to call a certain project. I may, in a couple of cases, change that title down the line, but still at the beginning I could label it something. With this one, for whatever reason, I think it's because you have the 3 different characters that are all kind of doing their own thing. Either what I came up with was more specific to just one of those characters rather than encompassing all 3, and that would unfairly single them out as the main one when they're all meant to be equal. Or alternatively, I come up with something that's a lot more vague about the world in general, and that just isn't as satisfying. Right now, what I'm working on with is Adjacent Truths. That's kind of the working title at the moment. I don't know if that's going to be maintained, that's what it is. But again, just this ever sense that, because I can't get a title, it just feels like I don't yet have a full enough understanding of this world that I'm creating, which I'm creating from scratch, which is a whole other thing as well, because usually even if I have stories that are taking place in space or whatever, there's usually still, at least so far, have been Earth-based elements that I can connect to and relate to. And so yeah, I understand this and I'm more just fleshing out alternative versions of this. With the events happening in Adjacent Truths, because it is such an isolated planet elsewhere across space, completely different people that's never had interactions with Earth. While I know that you may be able to, there are certain things that maybe a society is inherently going to do or be like, I feel compelled that it has to be built from the ground up for these people specifically, rather than just automatically going with what humans have done. Based on their anatomy, they won't use base 10. Their maths can either operate in base 8 or base 14, and also so that affects how they do all kind of numbers and stuff. Again, the different hierarchies and roles in the society and everything, and just how their rooms are built, or what do they have in their rooms, what do they eat, how do they eat, kind of what is their day structured like, also with an additional day-night cycle, which is its whole other thing that I have a spreadsheet for the numbers, like how many seconds in a minute, how many minutes in an hour, and so forth. And also having to keep on converting that back into our Earth time to be able to actually rationalise in my head, wait, how much time is that actually passing if I say it's been a couple of hours over there? and so forth. So again, it's building this world from the ground up. I obviously need to make it feel real to the reader to make sure they get introduced to everything that they can imagine it, while not just being a complete exposition dump left, right and centre. But in order to do that, I need to have that firm understanding as well. So I think because I'm still going through the process of filling out this world as it is, it won't be until I've got even further down that process that I'll be even more content with putting it properly to page. Kind of on that note, because obviously it's the Ragnarök Chronicles, there are relations to mythologies in each of the books. In this one particularly, I'm mostly taking from Celtic mythology, although there is some Norse in there as well, so that's also helpful in cases for inspiration. Usually it is the case that I would have come up, because I'll be using stories that I came up with when I was younger, I am now kind of applying mythological parallels to those stories and making tweaks here and there, but because this is a much more recent one, while I still had some kind of baseline ideas for what's happening in this world already, a lot more of these are coming from by looking at Celtic mythology, looking at those stories, what could I do that would kind of be an allegory for those. So it is much more being directly inspired by the mythology that I'm then saying was inspired by those events, by glimpses of the multiverse. So that's helpful as well. And again, that's also where kind of the names are going to be coming from, because there's corruptions of those Celtic words, etc. Also, just again as part of this part of not necessarily real mythology, but the mythology of the series. Because right now, because it's such an isolated world out in the middle of nowhere and a one-off story, right now it would stand that it has zero connection to the rest of the Ragnarök Chronicles. Why would it be a part of that? Why would it not just be some other random book? Well, I've already mentioned that to do with the dating was based upon information coming from one place to another. That really doesn't have to be there. That's more of a retroactive explanation for where the source of that thing was. Again, I'm being non-specific just because I don't want to go into the details of the story right now. But again, it wouldn't be important necessarily to say that. So instead, there are some other elements within the book as well, which were put in to serve as explanations for other things that happen. So if you've watched the video I've done on the history of the entities, these energy-based beings that call themselves gods, specifically part 2, where I talk about how some of the factions stayed in the Alpha realm and lived off their own lives. This book now will also give hints to what was the ultimate fate of that group, even though it's not explicit, because the people of this world, Balte, they don't know about the entities. They just find some stuff which, if you know kind of some other stuff from the wider books, if you read those as well, you can piece together, oh, that was that group of entities, this is what happened to them, therefore. This also before that group of entities is even really introduced in any of the books otherwise. So it's kind of laying the groundwork for an explanation to a question that may be asked or set up later on. Again, as ever with these, each individual sub-series / individual book can be read independently, that is how they're designed, but it is just more, if you then were to read each of the different sets together, that would then help to build out the grander history. It's just giving that extra detail, although that's not necessary to appreciate the contained story within each section. But anyway, yeah, that's just where I am now. Again, I've got basically all the details for the story. I know exactly all that needs to happen in each chapter, to each major beat for each character to go through their journeys respectively to create the plot of this book. It's just a matter of, through various reasons, it's taking me longer than it did with some of the previous ones to actually be getting it to page. But rest assured, it obviously will be done eventually, because I still want, no matter what any of the hardships or the writer's block, whatever, I want to tell this story. It is something I find interesting and it's also part of my project. But beyond that, also I want to write the other books as well. So it's kind of a two-pronged thing there, but also I just want to make it clear that I'm not writing it just because I feel I have to write it for the sake of getting the series done. It is also still a story that I think can be interesting, can be done well. It's just a matter of finding the right way to go about it. Hopefully you have found some of that interesting. Again, just that's where I am right now as a writer in terms of creating new content instead of doing these videos or releasing the books that have already been written. Hopefully you can check out other videos on the channel as well if you found that interesting. And either way, until I next see you, just keep on telling stories.